Welcome to Writers Are the Best Weirdos, the podcast starring me, Julia Roberts. I am a creativity coach, speaker, writer, and a weirdo. Aren't you? We're going to answer a lot of questions about pubbing and promoting and marketing your books, so stay tuned. Hey, everybody. We're going to join Jane Tabachnick, who is a PR specialist. I'm going to read you her lovely bio, and then we're going to dig right in with Jane. She's got a lot to share with us today. Okay. So Jane was the founder of an award-winning book publishing and publicity company. She works with savvy entrepreneurs and enlightened professionals to help them become published authors and leverage their books to create greater visibility and buzz. Her book publishing firm, easy for you to say, and PR firm Simply Good Press helps experts to go from idea to published books and run their book promotion campaigns. They also mentor authors on book writing, publishing, and promotion. She has helped over 200 authors reach bestseller status. Named one of the top 100 people online by Fast Company, which is no small deal. We'll have to talk about that in a minute, Jane. Jane has been featured or quoted in Clickz, Crain, ABC, CBS, the New York Enterprise Report, Star Ledger, Environmental Leader, CNN, Houston Magazine, Spa Magazine, Women's Wear Daily, and other media outlets. Now, welcome, Jane. So nice to see you.
Hi.
Yeah.
Great to see you.
Jane and I met maybe 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago.
Probably
and
a little more.
Probably a little more, because you know what everybody does with the
COVID.
The COVID pandemic was 2.5 years, and everybody thinks of it as basically a year, or half a year.
Exactly. So it's been a day. It's
been a minute, as the youngins say. So I really wanted to reach out to you because I think publicity is often one of those things that people feel like is out of reach. Like we don't have those leads, or we don't have that temerity. You know, if other people are reaching out for you, it feels better than if you call and say, hi, I'd like to be featured in the New York Times. I mean, my book's pretty good. So that's, I think a lot of people feel that actual traditional press coverage, media coverage is out of reach. So tell us if that's, you know, how that's tackled or what we undertake to get press.
Yeah, so it absolutely is not out of reach. Anyone can do their own press, but I would say it helps to take the time to learn a little bit about how PR works. There's a lot of confusion around it, and I think it's even more approachable than it's ever been. And I have shown people how in a few minutes a day they can work at getting press. There are a lot of free opportunities. People have probably heard of Arrow or Help a Reporter Out. There are a couple of services like that. I call them media matchmaking services, where there are journalists or producers or bloggers even who are looking for a source. The story is already green lighted, so it can happen very quickly. And you're often better at pitching yourself for those kind of opportunities than your PR person or your publisher, because you really know your material, your subject matter, your story so much better.
Okay, well, so what about, so those are people reaching out, and that makes sense. And one of them's Harrow, I know there's a Click Expert that's not free. Harrow's free.
There's another one called Quoted, QWOTED, which is really good. There's another one called Terkel, TERKEL, which is, they're small little sound bites that you can contribute, but you know, everything adds up to a bigger picture. People always think, you know, front page of the Times kind of big splash article, which is great. I mean, don't get me wrong, those are golden, but those often don't happen right away. And every even little quote you get in a smaller publication can build up to bigger things. As an example, Julia and I, we didn't know each other then, but we were almost neighbors. We lived in neighboring towns. And the town that I live in has a lot of media professionals. It's a suburb community of New York City, a bedroom community, is that what you call it? And so if you were to be featured in the local paper here, there are a lot of big media professionals who would probably read it. So your
Yeah,
story could go from your local paper in any
right?
town, not just my town, and get picked up, get noticed, and then get picked up in another publication or get invited onto a talk show,
Mhm.
etc.
Yeah, so that is absolutely true. I've gotten picked up by my teeny paper, the Glen Ridge paper, which
Exactly.
if that sells 2,500, I'd be surprised. To the Star Ledger, to I have traded up and up.
Yes.
I've never had a front page of the Times. I would think that'd be solidly scary because that means you're news. Not
Yes.
most of us don't really
Yes.
want to be news. Anyway, but
Nowadays, yeah.
my word. But anyway, so what about like book launch time? And
Yeah.
do you still the old-fashioned press release, or how do you?
Yeah. So press releases are a great tool. And here's why. They are a standardized format to provide information in an organized way that's easy for the media to digest or a search engine. For the most part, press releases are not going to get you pickups. Back in the day when there was a lot less noise and media rooms had more staff, let's face it, you probably read about the layoffs and things, that there's less staff who have to cover all the stories. They're not scouring press or wire services to find stories. So
Okay,
the
so
chance,
what's the usefulness then?
yeah, so the usefulness is twofold. They can be really good. I like to use them because it will plant a story or a result in the search engine. So we like to
Okay.
optimize it for specific keywords or names so that it comes up in the search engines. And it will get placed in certain online publications, which will have longevity, which is valuable. But a press release can be really great to send to the media. But this is important. This is a good place to take a note. You don't just want to put in the subject line, hey, here's my press release. I wrote a book, and then attach it. That's not how you use a press release. You still need to come up, well, people do it. I get them all
Yep.
the time.
Here's my press release.
Yeah. So the
Read
way
more.
that so two things to think about. So you want to make a really great pitch, which is
Mhm.
partly your subject line and then a few more details in the email, in the body. And then the press release, the best thing to do is paste it at the bottom. Just say, I put the full release in the bottom for your information. Don't
Rather
attach
than
them.
attach, right? Because they don't
Right,
know you.
because, well, not just that, that sometimes the servers will just remove attachments at bigger companies. They're afraid that they might have viruses, what have you. So you just paste it, let them know it's there, but paste it into the bottom. And that way you're giving them the information, but not, risking it not being seen and not clogging the email with lots of information they're just not going to read. They have to be able to scan 2 or 3 lines and see if they're interested or they're on to the next.
And
It's
then they'll
that
jump
quick.
down to the press release, which they're accustomed to that layout. They know where to look for what they need.
Exactly,
Mhm, mhm.
exactly. And they can grab the information from that. If they decide to write a story, they can grab your bio from the boilerplate of the press release or a link to the book, things like that.
Yeah. So I can see that. Okay, so I'm hooking from the email and I'm saying, hopefully I know a little bit about who I'm writing to. So I can say,
Yes,
this is a great follow-up to the story last week on X. Or I can say, feels like you talk about this a lot, and I love when you cover this topic. Or
yeah,
those things are hard though. That's why a professional really is
yes,
versed on those people, and they understand the marketplace of writers and journalists and reporters and stuff, and they go, who's going to like this, and I'll get it to them with a personal.
yeah. So
Mhm.
here's something, that's such a good point. So here's something to think about. So in a perfect world, if you wanted to and have the budget for a team to do your PR for you, that would be the case. But you can also hire a PR person just to help you pull a list. For example, say, here are the top 50 media outlets that would be great for your story.
Right,
Or you could have them help you come up with the story ideas that would be most pitchable or intriguing to those outlets. But
right, okay.
you really don't need professionals. What I really encourage people to think about is shifting the thought. The goal is you want press, you want your book written about, featured, etc. no need to change that. That's great. But you need to shift the way that you think about approaching the media. It's not, hey, I wrote a book, I want you to cover it. And I get some of those pitches sometimes. That is typically, unless you're, Madonna, that's not, that's not going
Yeah.
to get you the
Because
press.
how
So
many
what
books are written every day? I think it's like
a
1,800
lot,
a day, right? So
a
yeah,
lot.
it's
Yes.
not
And
actually news.
but it is. I do want to stop for a second. Everyone listening should celebrate when they write a book. It is news. It is a big accomplishment. But to
Mhm.
get the coveted space on a talk show, like on, the Today Show or in the Times, even if it's not the front cover, you have to have a story hook that actually is going to interest not just a journalist, but they think it's going to interest their audience. And
Yeah,
that's where the mindset shift has to happen. You have to put yourself into their shoes and think, why would they be interested in this? What value would this offer their audience?
right.
And if
I was
you
just
can,
thinking that because I had a book that was traditionally published in '08. So the world has changed enormously since '08. I won't pretend it hasn't. But that
yeah,
got print coverage and some cable TV coverage. So like
mhm,
Comcast or,
nice,
yeah.
yeah,
So, and that was traditionally published. That was I had a publicist I could refer people to, etc. Then, but then I had a self, like straight up self-published, Amazon was called Book Surge at the time, book called Are We There Yet? And that was written by me and my children on a cross country trip, right? And it was funny and interesting. So we were going to travel from Florida to Maine with the RV, pull it into your studio if you want. My kids were 6, 9, and 12. We had little videos of like what,
adorable.
we got so much coverage.
Yeah, I'm not
we
surprised.
got,
Yeah,
I mean, we got bumped once in a while if something more important happened. Like that
right.
happened in in New York, because it's hard to get on the New York show, but we were there with our darn RV 2 days in a row, and both days got bumped by whatever political thing happened. I don't remember, but the smaller markets, we got in, we got out. We did the little thing. My kids were
Yeah.
hams, and one of them was the 12-year-old, of course, resented it all, and which, guess what, the audience enjoyed. Didn't know that she was smirking, and that was sort of just like part of the fun for young people. I mean, families watching from home. So having
Absolutely.
just even that level of entertainment value, which fiction does very well.
Yes.
But the entertainment value is what they're looking for, whether it's news, like entertainment because it's new and interesting facts, or it's a solution to a problem I'm having. That's still sort of entertainment value or audience value at the very least. But
Absolutely.
yeah. hmm So
Also, if there's some unique way that you've written it, I actually wrote a a small book on my phone. So I was spending a lot of time on New Jersey Transit, commuting in and out of New York City, and I didn't really want to bring a laptop. And so, if you've written your book on your phone, or you've dictated it, or you've done it every time you're waiting in the carpool line to pick up your kids, then
yeah.
that can be a story. And that may not be the main story you want to tell about your book. Maybe you've written a beautiful novel set in, 1800s on Martha's Vineyard. I don't know. And so you'd really rather talk about the characters, etc. But sometimes you have to find the way in to then be able to get to talk about your beautiful story.
And
And
you
I think,
you in your head know the pivot. The pivot is I'm a modern mom waiting to pick up my kid in a carpool lane, and I'm channeling Martha's Vineyard historical correctness, et cetera. So you have to preconceive that pivot so that you get to talk about what you want to talk about, right? Or
yeah,
why it was
yeah,
important to you. That's cool. I
yeah,
like that.
yeah, exactly. And
I'm
so
going to write my book naked, I think, right? That's what I should do. Don't
well,
picture it. Don't
I
picture it.
was just
Hex.
going to say they may ask you to come on and talk about it naked. Are you willing
I
to?
don't think so. There's a photo with your press release, right? I don't think they will. No, we
So you
don't
can
need
hide
that.
with your book. That'd be funny though, if you're naked, except, you got your book strategically in front of you. So,
It's just like,
and
you know, right at the boots.
why not?
Yep.
And, that's a good point though. I'm so glad you mentioned, photos are really important. I think authors sometimes forget this, having really good photos. And one of the photos that I think authors miss out on a lot is them holding their book. It sounds kind of corny, but it's a really great, first of all, you need photos for your good photos for your book cover. So
Yeah.
you'll want to have photos in advance. And I'm actually thinking, we haven't done this yet, but I thought, if you're doing a photo shoot beforehand and maybe you don't have the budget to do one after with the book, maybe you can hold up a different book and then have
Dummy it in.
your
Yeah,
book
Photoshop it in.
Photoshop into it. I think that'll work.
I do too, actually. I
But,
think that's smart. Yeah. Because
but you
yeah,
want to have,
or when it arrives, like if you photograph with a pile of books or that kind of thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Mhm.
So you want to have a number of good photos and,
I don't have that picture of me with my book. I have to do that. That's ridiculous. That is a really basic picture. Just,
right.
here,
And
I'll do it.
so
I got to do a
it's kind of a
screenshot.
2-for-1. You get the author in and it's a like a subtle promo. So I think
Yeah.
it's a good thing to
Mhm.
do. And I also think have fun with it. They don't all have to be serious photo. I know people, you've probably heard this, who will take their book, go to a bookstore and put it on the shelf and take a picture and say, look, I'm in Barnes and Noble.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So have some fun with it, but
Mhm.
have a number of good quality photos. Look, they can be taken with a good phone. You don't need a professional photographer or camera these days, but you do need to have a decent quality, fairly clear
Resolution.
background. Unless,
Yeah.
and unless you're in a specific setting, you want it pretty neutral. So you and the book are the focus.
Right. You don't want this behind you. Right.
Yeah, it's a little much for print. It's fun
Yeah.
for what we're doing,
Mhm.
So
Mhm. So
yeah,
does fiction have a harder time getting press? Is it,
it
or
can.
reviews? What about reviews? Mhm.
Yeah, so it can have a harder time getting press because I think, again, some authors, if they're doing their own press, may approach it like, I wrote this book, cover it. And you've really got to find the story hooks with your book. We spoke about how you wrote it. Is there something unique about that? Is there a setting that's unique in a specific location? Back to Martha's Vineyard, not a big place, but you could certainly approach the Martha's Vineyard publications and Massachusetts publications and use
Mhm.
that as part of your story hook. You can
Also,
also,
why, how you thought of it, why, how long you've been writing it.
right,
People are fascinated by writers
love
generally. Mhm.
love the behind the scenes. I think
Mhm.
that's like, even back to the photos, include photos of your office or where you like to write. I
Mhm.
think people just really like to see that. So you have to really try and find the story hooks. And sometimes, if you're not yet known, I like to borrow a technique from startup companies.
Okay.
So everyone likes to think they're unique, but if people like certain writers, like say they like Joan Didion, and your work by some early readers has been compared to that, you could say it's like a modern day Joan Didion. That gives
Mhm.
people a frame of reference for what the style might be, the subject matter, rather than just say it's a novel, you'll like it. Well, that's pretty
Yeah.
broad. And
Mhm.
that can be a little too intimidating for some people.
You can talk about
So,
your character though too. He's based on my dad in 1928, or it's based on,
yeah.
or it came from, I got the idea. You can even say I got the idea watching Star Trek or something. And especially if it's that
Oh,
genre.
that's a
You
great
don't want
one.
to take them, you don't want to take them down that genre if it's not your genre. But you see what I
Right.
mean? Yeah. You don't want to
Yes.
be
Yeah.
too.
You want to be careful. You don't want people to think, it's exactly like that. So why read it? But there, just find some commonality that can bring people in or give them a reason to write about it. Oh, we love everything Star Trek. I've got to read this book. Let's talk about this book that was inspired by this incredible TV
Borrow
series and
Sheen.
movie
Definitely
series.
borrow Sheen. Right.
Yeah,
And then, yeah.
exactly.
So also I would say, I was just gonna, you can talk about your main characters, you can talk about your genre, you can talk about things that inspired you, or something that you heard a joke and that made you do this, or as long as you, kind of, I would say keep these lists as you're going, because it's very hard to remember them.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's a good idea to brainstorm all the potential story hooks that you have.
That's a good thing. That's a really good way to use a professional, because they really are not blinded by, I got a book,
Right.
or overwhelmed by this feeling of like, oh no, now I have to do something I don't like doing, market
Yeah.
my book,
Yeah.
So that's really a good place to borrow perspective, expertise, just even cheerleading and encouragement. It's very hard to shift gears, and go
Yes.
from, it's hard enough just to release your book for some people. I mean, people get stuck
It
at different places,
it
but
is for sure. And it's also, it's intimidating and it can feel like you're being rejected if you put yourself out there by pitching the media. But here's the thing, 99% of pitches are not even going to get a response.
right.
It's not personal, it's just sheer volume. But here's the thing, and here's why it can be really good to have a topic or hook, whether it's a location or, the Star Wars. If it's in your subject line in the body of the email, journalists who I speak to tell me that they will file things in their email. They have their folders and tagging systems, and they will file it by that keyword. And they may not remember your name or the book title, but let's say, I got that pitch for that story that involves Star Trek. Now they'll just do a search for it. And I've had people reach out to me 6 months later. I pitch them and they filed it. They just didn't have room in their calendar and their, in their show, whatever, to feature it. But they knew at some point it was of interest, but they're not necessarily going to tell you that. So I just want everyone to know that it's not personal. They do read things and file things, but also it's okay. And you should follow up. A lot of the best press we've gotten for clients has come on the follow-up.
Okay.
So what you don't want to do is, hey, did you read it? Did you get my pitch? You want to just say following up on what I do. And I think this is the easiest and best thing to do is take the original email, go into your send box and forward it to the journalist. So all the info is still there, and just say, hey, following up, the subject line is the same, right? And so just following up, see if there's any interest, and just put one line of what it's about, info still below, kind of thing.
I will say podcasts and or radio, and for that matter, TV, it is good to call yourself. They want to hear your voice, hear your energy. They want to hear you. You're the guest. The podcast will be back in less than a minute. Writers, does this ever happen to you? You can't write, though you try and try. Whoa! Writer's block just knocks you down. It doesn't have to be so flinging hard. Join the Mighty Writers Club. We write together up to 5 days a week. We have a coaching and creativity training 2 times a month. You get your writing done in a community. We're with you all the way. Act now. Join us before you end up like her. Be mighty. The Mighty Writers Club. Find us at go.decodingcreativity.com/mighty. So I found that I've gotten people bumped and me put in because I was on the phone saying, me and my kids are in your town on such and such a date. We could do this thing,
That's great.
Halfway through that thing, we had come across the word glamping. So, so that became the hook because that was a new word.
Yes.
So, and we were literally like, I think we'd gotten from Maine to New York and we're taking a break and trying to get on those New York shows. I think glamping got us a call back on those New York shows. So those weird words, if you think to yourself, they were just in a meeting and somebody told them they have to find X. What would that be? They have to they need more articles on Y. What might that be? Especially if it's in let's say your territory of parenting. They have those meetings, and all of a sudden they totally want something, more stuff on helicopter parents or more stuff on, there's a topic that's cresting right now. And whether your book fits it really well or not, if you scratch that itch, you at least get a conversation. So we weren't glampers.
Absolutely.
We were kind of glampers. We had a microwave, but we but glamping tends to be like in an exotic place. We were at a KOA, you know. But you get a conversation for having that sort of buzzword. I'm trying to think of a buzzword that's out right now, that's like kind of trending right now that people are wanting to talk about. But I could, but I'm not.
Like the Great Resignation. Say you had written a novel about someone who decided, COVID changed their life, and they decided that they weren't going to be doing this job anymore, and they were going to finally become the entrepreneur they thought they would become when they retired. They said, okay, seize the day.
Right. And the book was called, so your headline basically, I mean, your two subject line is basically something along the lines of the Great Resignation, so because they were just in a meeting and somebody just said, this is a trend, we want more coverage.
Right. And those, even though they are kind of buzzwords, it makes it easy for someone to instantly say, I kind of know what that's about.
Right. Hey, there's nothing wrong with buzzwords.
Right.
You know what I mean? The reason they're buzzwords is they communicate. All of a sudden somebody goes, I know what you're talking about, because you're using this buzzword that in 2 words brings me 25 concepts, right? That's why we have them.
That said, though, yes, for any nonfiction authors, you have to be careful with that, though, because sometimes people have industry-specific buzzwords that they are so entrenched in their industry, they don't realize or haven't checked that outside the industry, no one has a clue what the buzzwords mean. And so if you pitch a journalist who only writes about that topic, they will probably know what you're talking about. For anyone else, it's going to be like it's in a foreign language, and it can actually sink your pitch. So that's something to check for.
Yeah, I meant public buzzwords, but I agree with you. If you're too jargony, probably your book is too jargony too for general publication.
Right.
If you're in a trade mag, you're trying to get in trade mags, that's a different, then you can start saying things like, my old industry was like POP and, which is point of purchase, the things that people don't say in real life,
Yes.
EDLP.
Acronyms.
Yeah. Everyday low pricing,
Yeah.
An FSI, that's those inserts in the newspaper. I really have to drag my head back to those times. It's been a long time since I've done really consumer good marketing. Yeah. But all right. Yeah. So what about podcasts? Do they really have much impact?
I was just thinking about podcasts. We love podcasts. So all my authors now do podcast tours, and it's so fun. It's so approachable. And I think a lot of podcasts have engaged audiences who are really interested in the episodes, the speakers. And I can't say for sure it will go impact book sales or get people to go out and buy it, but it gives them a real taste of you. Reading an article is great, but it's not the same, like you just said about the voice, when you call to pitch someone, hearing someone, both their voice and their responses, builds that know, like, and trust, which is what really motivates us to want to follow someone or to read their writing, even if their writing is nothing like the way they speak. But it just helps connect with another human. And I think that's so valuable. And it really gives you a chance to give some of the backstory on your book and talk about your characters. And
but your worldview, your values, the listeners sync up with that. And even if you don't even if it's not about characters or whatever in that podcast, you don't get a whole lot of, you don't get a reading, or you don't, we'll get to readings in a minute because I love readings. But but you do get a sense of what that person values. And I want to read books by people who have similar values or interesting or unique values, because I want to see how do they ferret that out? That's interesting. How do they make that fictional in particular? That's interesting. Right.
Yeah. And they can, those are things you can book yourself. There are a lot of services that will help you book podcasts. There are, like, we actually do it for our clients, but there are services like platforms you can sign on to, which will help do the matchmaking, like Podmatch and Podcast
Matchmaker
Guests.
FM. I'm sorry, you were saying?
Yeah, the Podcast Guests.
Oh, okay. I shouldn't be taking notes, but that's how useful you are. See how I picked up my notepad? Like I'm A listener, not a host.
I love to empower people. I believe people can do their own PR, but even when you've got a PR team, sometimes they're not that hooked in with podcasts. So we just like to give people resources, and writing a book is such a magical and blood, sweat, tears, heart, soul experience. And so I really like to help empower authors to succeed and get their book and their message out there more widely. And I know it's not always easy. Some writers just want to write. They don't really want to have to deal with the marketing and promotion. I get it. I do.
Jane Friedman says nobody got into writing books for the marketing. Woo!
I know. I love that. I love that. I know. So true.
And you have to shift. You really have to shift from this immersion in a world to a whole new world that's completely opportunistic and fast-paced. To go, and it's a completely different mindset. You really do have to shift. Even the locus of where your thinking is coming from shifts.
Yes. And even if you don't want to do it, I just want to encourage people trying to have fun with it, because it can't, like, I love doing like this podcast interview. It's fun. You get to connect with really amazing people and have a great conversation. And especially since COVID, like this is
you are my social life.
This is a delight, so I think it's just a great opportunity for everyone, for the people doing the interview, the interviewees, and for the audience. But the one thing I do want to add here, whether you're doing it yourself or if you have a team, that while it can be hard to take focus away from the writing, the mistake I see a lot of authors make is not start to think about the marketing or promotion until the manuscript is done or the book is basically published. And that is often late. It doesn't mean you can't start then. You can, but you've lost time. I call it the helicopter versus the airplane approach. You want that runway to start building your author platform or just starting to pitch podcasts. I mean, I started pitching a client in December now, a holiday time, but I had people saying, sure, but we can't book her till July.
Yeah.
And so if she's interviewed in July, when's the interview coming out?
Also true. This is, people really like stomp their feet and roll their eyes that publishers take 2 years or a year and a half to get a book out. That's a lot of why. They, not only just graphic design, editing, et cetera, but also that long lead article, that, that, as you say, runway instead of helicopter pad.
Yeah.
You want, in order for them to invest in your book, they want to have the opportunity to do great publishing. I mean, great publicity. So, and as well they should. They're basically betting on your book with you, Yeah.
But you are as well. So I just like to encourage authors, as hard as it is, because I know you've got enough to do with the writing, editing, everything else going on, but just even one little outreach a day to a podcast or one a week, even if that's all you can manage, is better than nothing. It's going to move you closer to having some good momentum when the book actually publishes, and having those interviews happen sooner rather than later.
Yeah. I always talk about that as well. And I also talk building your platform as you write. It's really, because it's going to take you 2 years to write a book, unless you're writing a nonfiction that's really out of your expertise, really within your expertise. And, but for the most part, if you're writing a fictional novel, nobody kicks those. Well, people do. But, but in the time it takes you.
And there are books.
But in the time it takes you to write your book, you have time to build a platform. And so a lot of people will consider that dreadful. So you do have to find your way, and you do have to understand your creativity and what kind of creativity you might like to bring to it. So obviously I'm you too, we're easygoing and talkative, and we don't mind. Podcasts could really freak other people out. But what they want to do is whatever, spray paint something on walls, which would freak me out. Or they want to do little recipes that lead people to their cookbook or whatever. But there's ways you have to not think of all this stuff you don't want to do and everybody's going to make you do it, period. End of subject. Wipe that clean and think to yourself, what would I enjoy doing? I like blogging, or I like riding a bike around with a sign, or, whatever it is that really will help you feel like your best self, which would communicate who you are. And if you're a quiet,
Yes.
meticulous person, it's okay to communicate exactly that. You don't have to suddenly turn it on and be who you're not,
Yeah, agreed. Well, I agree with that. And I would add two things. One, sometimes it's good to push yourself out of your comfort zone and try some things. Look, if you're really, really, really dreadfully uncomfortable being on camera and you're not interested in doing it or not willing to get some coaching so that you feel like you have better skills and are comfortable doing it, then by all means, don't do it. No need to do it. That said, you also need to have a sense of where your audience spends time, because if
Oh yeah,
you're
that's
busy
critical.
painting walls, great,
Mhm.
but if none of your
Nobody said I was
potential
a
readers
PR
are seeing
professional,
it.
okay? You don't have to say my idea is bad.
I didn't say it's bad.
No, I'm just kidding.
I
I'm
like
just
to
kidding.
balance it with, okay, I love to do this, and how can I do this in the same place where at least a good portion of my audience likes to spend time?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that is something see, we did this whole thing and I had lost sight of that. Where does my audience live is really an important question. What about
Yeah, and what
readings?
interests them? I mean, do they like audio? Do they prefer video? It's
Yeah.
probably a combination, but there may be, they may be they may like some audiences like, I tend to be a little geekier, so I tend to like things that are online or, like that. Some people not so much, not at all. So it's just
Some
important to
people,
understand
yeah.
that.
Some people like transcripts. They don't really want to watch the video. They'd rather just scan it, and especially readers. When you think of readers, they might
Yes,
be a little different in the world than all the other consumers.
absolutely.
Yeah. So you might take that into account as well. What about readings? Do you help people get readings, or is that?
We, we did a while ago, a number of years ago, pre-pandemic, and um, I found them really hard to set up. So here's the thing. So depending on how much of a name or a platform an author has, it can be
Mhm.
easy for them to fill a place or not so easy. And so a lot of bookstores nowadays want you to bring the audience.
Right? And you
So,
might have a big platform, and yet when you get to a store in, Chicago, you might have very few people in Chicago,
right.
you know? Yeah.
Exactly. So, sometimes readings and book launch parties are fun. They're good for the ego, but ultimately, in terms of book marketing and promotion, they don't necessarily move the needle and may not be the best use of one's time and budget. I had a chat with, you probably know Watchung Booksellers here in
Yeah.
Montclair. We have a
Hmm.
really amazing bookstore where I live, and they have a lot of events, a lot of author talks and readings. And I had a chat with the owner recently, who happens to be my neighbor, and she said that they have no trouble filling their events. They don't need their authors to bring the audience. She said, because a lot of times if the author brings the audience, it's friends and family, then they don't really buy the book. They may
Right.
have bought it already. And what she said, which was interesting, is nonfiction books don't do as well if it's a big name speaker. Like they actually had Hillary Clinton here when her book came out, you know.
Oh.
Um, yeah, not at the bookstore. They had a bigger venue, they did it
Oh,
in
okay. I was thinking,
association
my
with.
God.
No,
Yeah,
no, no. It was
I've
at
had readings there, but that's why I was
yeah,
wondering. I think when people, especially with novels, they kind of envision this book tour thing that just doesn't really exist anymore. Like the
yeah,
publisher's going to put you on a plane and you're going to be in 20 bookstores in 20 days, and that kind of thing. But I think readings still have appeal to that quieter writer, and
yes,
also to the listeners, but that's something you could put a reading on your page, on your Facebook page, on your Insta page. You could put a
yeah,
video of, but I do think that readings are something that people um, think is going to happen for them. And so it has to be slightly altered as to in the expectations. I think there's a little disappointment there that readings have gone away from the author's point of view. So
yeah,
that's what you can do a video, you can
yeah.
do, yeah. Mhm.
Well, I would say, readings are great. I would encourage people, and this is what we tried to do the last time we did we're trying to do some readings, is try and find some partners who have an audience where there's some kind of a symbiotic um, potential with the topic, or a
That's a great
reason for them to bring in the audience. You know,
idea.
maybe you have a local organization who wants to sponsor it, and they'll pay for the venue, the food, buy everyone a copy of the book because they get their name associated with it. But someone is going to help you fill the room and cover the costs.
You know, I was talking about that book, Are We There Yet? Which really I don't ever promote
Yeah.
anymore because it's from 2004, but that had a sponsor, Magellan GPS, which nobody had heard of GPSs at the time. And they just did all sorts of, I mean, first of all,
Amazing.
they booked all those things. They bought blogs from me, bought blogs.
Wow.
Here's-
Amazing.
and paid for all sorts of things, you know, along the way. But borrowing audiences is something we could just end on. If you just took one thing away from all of this, how do you borrow
Absolutely.
an audience? Because that's what a newspaper is, that's what a podcast is.
Absolutely.
But there's other ways of borrowing audiences. Like you and I are borrowing each other's audiences right now, just as pals and
Yeah.
friends in the same industry. It doesn't always have to
Yeah.
be the New York Times to get relevant people to know about your book.
Yeah.
You know?
Book
Mhm.
clubs. You know, I have a local author who got on the USA Today bestseller list. She's self-published, and she made it known, and she pursued book clubs. She made it known she would go be a guest and speak
Yeah.
to the book club. And so if you think about, and it's a novel, it's a really clever, I love this novel. I forget what it's called, something box.
I thought you were talking about Eva.
Eva, yes.
Yeah.
And
I
so
can't
if you
remember that.
think about
Navatella?
it,
Mhm.
yes. So if you think about it, when you have a book clubs buying your book, you've 10x'd your sales. So
And
instead of
yeah.
right,
Yeah.
instead of one person buying it, the whole book club is buying the book or asking the library or the local bookstore to get copies. So she easily 10x'd her sales and built some incredible buzz and momentum by doing that. I thought it was so genius.
It's and she totally had a tab on her website that said book club, so people would know
Yes.
that there's So yeah, I've seen her at maybe a writers conference, and she's going to be a guest on our podcast as well.
Oh, awesome.
In her
Yeah.
that's an audience, borrowing that audience, and sometimes
Exactly.
she just Skyped in, well, not Skyped, but
Yes.
Zoomed into the book
Right.
club, and you
Exactly.
have a
Yeah.
surprise guest, you know, or something like that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. So I think that's the key thought, is how do you borrow an audience that you're going to enjoy talking to? No writer doesn't enjoy talking to people. That's what we're doing the whole time we're writing. There's always a reader, you know, there's always somebody else that your brain is collaborating with. So how do you get that enthusiasm or dedication? You go at it maybe differently from me, but you might not you, but one, you know, you might go at
Yeah.
it in a dedicated, serious way. I might go at it in a fun and funny way. Somebody else might go at it in a really colorful, provocative way. But that same way is how you then go forward with your publicity, not because it matches, but because it matches you, you know, because you can present for that. You can be present and happy with that.
Exactly.
Right. Mhm. I
Yeah.
always love talking with you so much. I'm so glad you were here and could share
Thank you. Always a
really
pleasure.
this daunting topic. You've cut it down to size for us. I mean, how many people listening right now think they could get a New York Times article? Not many, but Jane could get us one. But more importantly, I think what she's done is point out all the many ways we can factor ourselves in, where we might need perspective, which I do think you need on your own book. Yeah, like those lists or those hooks. Those things are a specific capability that you may or may not have. And but then you might also still then have your own voice and your own presence you have to, whether Jane was representing you or you're representing yourself, you still have to figure out what your personal presence is as you market.
Exactly.
Cool.
Julia,
Well, it's really
thank
been
you.
fun. Hey, thanks for listening. If you liked it, please subscribe and tell your friends. What did you learn today? What was your takeaway? What are you going to do today? Put it in the comments. We all want to know. Meanwhile, get my book, Write Without the Fight. You want to master your creative process so you can write with more ease and satisfaction. The links are all in the description box. Join us, because writers are the best weirdos.